So good morning.
Good morning.
So we gathered to celebrate the memory of Hank, and we do so at this Mass this morning. And we recognize also that in Arizona, Hank's family is going to be celebrating his life. And Father Sergio of St. Anne's, where Hank went every morning to celebrate Mass with the community at St. Anne's, Father Sergio, the pastor, is going to give the homily, which I actually prepared at the request of Johnny for Father Sergio to give a reflection on Hank. So in the meantime, I thought it'd be appropriate, and we welcome our family out in Arizona. Good morning. It's the day after Thanksgiving. We hope you had a good Thanksgiving. We especially give greetings to you, Alice, and to all your sons, all of you out there in Arizona. And we thought we'd start by introducing who we are here at Middletown. And we thank Tim and also Patty for their hospitality and enabling us to celebrate Mass here this morning for Hank. So obviously I'm Bill Waters, and to my right is
Cassie Kennelly. Kelly Waters.
Paul Kennelly.
Grace Waters. Laura Waters.
I'm standing up so it's not such a close-up. Tim Waters.
Jane Waters.
Flo Kennelly.
Kara Kennelly. Patty Waters.
Joe Waters.
okay. And don't forget, can you do a selfie?
No.
You can't do a selfie. So Tracy Hoffman is now our videotape photographer, so she's here also with us. So we're all here together and to celebrate the Mass for Hank and to share some memories about him. So just to say in the beginning, obviously Mom and Dad got married. My mom and Dad got married in 1929, December 28th. And it was the Depression, 2 months after the Great Depression. And their first child actually was Thomas. He only lived for about maybe 8 hours. Mom only spoke about him once, and I talked to her about him. And he was buried actually in Grandpa Waters' graveside next to St. Peter's. So about a year after that, Hank was born in 1932. So, and then I came in 34, and then Joe came in 36. So my earliest memory of Hank, of course, he was the leadoff batter. He was the favorite of, obviously, he was the leadoff son. So Dad and Mom, of course, stowed it on him. Not that they didn't love Joe and myself, they did, and took care of us too, but he was number one, so he got center stage always. And so as I go forward into my earliest memories of Hank, we were at Malone Avenue, 80 Malone Avenue in Belleville, New Jersey. And Hank and I lived, or slept actually in a double-decker bed. And Joe had the single bed because he was the baby. Is that right?
I was the baby for a while, yeah.
Yeah, we were the baby for a while. So Joe can introduce, come into this anytime he wants. So going quickly fast forward, Dad, of course, would take us to all kinds of events. And because he was a great athlete in his own heyday at Belleville, New Jersey, in the high school, he was the coach of the track team, among other things, besides his business. And he would take Hank and myself to Brookdale Park, up in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And so I remember that very clearly, getting in the car. He also, we loved to jump on the side of the milk wagon. It had running boards. And of course, that was the early introduction to Hank and myself, and eventually to Joe, of the business. And but Hank, of course, was the one who did most of the work early in the morning. We used to get up at 4:30 a.m. to help my dad deliver milk. Believe it or not, we were doing that when we were going to elementary school. Well, we first went to number 3 school, where Aunt Margie Waters, Paulson, taught. Mom taught there also at one point. And number 3 on Geralman Street and Union Avenue. And when we were I was in 2nd grade finishing, and Hank was in 4th grade finishing, and Joe was coming along, and we ended up going to St. Peter's School on William Street. And when we would walk home, we would stop, of course, at Grandpa Waters' house and Grandma Waters.
Always to stop.
Always a stop. Where we at 3:30 in the afternoon, we would get something to drink, and of course, always something to eat. Grandma Waters was always there, sitting at the table. She was in her 60s. And so that became the center of our lives. Eventually, we moved into that house in May of 1951.
Wow.
I was a junior at St. Peter's Prep School, which is interesting. Hank went to Belleville High School, whereas I went to St. Peter's Prep. Joe went to St. Benedict's. And of course, Jerry Kennelly, we're
Jerry.
Florence, your husband, moved in with us in 1950. Or maybe it was 51, I'm sorry, I forget the dates exactly. But anyway, he moved in, and Joe and Jerry had the room on the second floor, 202. I had the room just outside there. Hank, of course, by this time had gone on to, after he graduated from Belleville High School, it was the Korean War. The Korean War opened in June 1950, and Hank, shortly after graduating, entered the Navy. And he was gone for at least 3 or 4 years. I can't remember exactly. He came back in 1954 after the Navy. And of course, he loved telling stories about his being on the boats, going into Brazil, going to England, and so on. Navy was a big part of his life.
He did, yeah. He saw a lot, actually.
He saw a lot.
He really
did. He loved to talk about it. And so after he came back, he immediately went into the business, into the milk business. And of course, Grandpa Waters had found the business in the early 1900s. And that business, of course, was going to flourish under Hank. He was going to make it much more, he's going to have milk stores and new trucks and all kinds of things that Hank developed for the business. And eventually he handed it over to Billy, his son. Any stories you want to tell, by the way?
No, but he did extend the business a lot.
Yeah, he did.
He was very good at it.
Yeah. So, by the way, anyone can chime in at any time. Obviously, when Hank came back, he not only went into the business, but Alice was his love. So they got married in April of 1956. And their first child comes along, Hemi Joe. And then they have 4 more boys. And of course, they are living at Rossmore Place in Belleville. I don't know if you remember that. In Belleville, New Jersey.
Sure.
And the house was a nice house. And they had a little pool in the back, one of these inflatable pools. And they would, I would visit. And then they, of course, moved to Nutley.
Right.
After this got too small as the boys grew, they had to move to Nutley. What was the name of the street then? Not Coinman Avenue.
No, that was mine.
That was your name.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the street now in Nutley. Do you remember the name of the street?
Prospect.
Prospect. Was it
I
Prospect?
think it was Prospect.
Okay, thank you. And with a much bigger house. It was an older house. And of course, it had a swimming pool. Hank put a swimming
They
pool.
had some wild parties at that.
And that was a
Yeah.
great,
That
was a great
fun
center.
house.
That was a
Maybe
party
you should
house.
shut up now and let these
Yeah.
young boys tell about it.
Yeah, exactly. I will. And so all the action shifted from pretty much from 202 and Rossmore Place up into Nutley, and the boys were growing, of course, and all kinds of things were happening. So you people remember more about, because I was gone. I would come periodically and visit, and join in the gala. Alice, of course, making all kinds of food in her great big kitchen, and of course all Bedlam,
The Irish children.
and the right.
All
you
the
remember.
Irish children they brought
Tremendous
over.
involvement
Oh, yeah.
for 20 years with the Irish children, bringing them over for 8 weeks, half of them Catholic, half of them Protestant, and it was great. They always had those Irish children in their home, and they visited, of course, Ireland again and again and again. In fact, in 1985, I came back from Africa, and Hank said, listen, you've never been to Ireland, you've never seen where Grandpa's been born, so I stopped. I flew into London, and then took a plane from London over to Belfast, and in 1985, and Hank met me in Derry. In Belfast, and we went up and stayed in Derry, and then went up to Lake Swilly, Loch Swilly rather, where Grandpa had been born. So. But why don't you talk about a little bit about Prospect Place or Prospect Avenue, things that went on there? I'm sure many parties. I know
I
that.
don't think we should talk about the things that went on there.
So,
I remember them having a goat,
They had to
and
go.
it ate the rhododendron and got sick while we were all standing there watching it do it. And it was a mess.
I think he used to love going up to the farmhouse they had too, up in the Pennsylvania.
yes,
Yeah.
they had a farmhouse. Yes, we don't want to leave that out. That became very much a part of their lives.
That became a big place.
Yeah.
And that girl who walked in the house up at the farm, he came right through one door and out the other.
Goated.
Yeah.
Oh.
I never saw the farm. Did you go up?
Oh, yeah, and brought the dog, our little dog,
Yeah.
and he was afraid of that goat walking around. That was like a
Little
pet,
dachshund?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to move the horses.
Oh,
Remember?
oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Uncle Hank was so annoyed, and David was getting so annoyed because the horse and the colt would not get in the trailer. And Uncle Hank was like, bleep, bleep, bleep. So of course David's like, just get in the trailer.
Oh, that was a scene, and
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Bryant were sitting in the kitchen, and we were staying out of this, trying to get the horses in.
Where was the horse? I'm missing this.
Well,
They had horses at a friend's farm, and the one horse David had a horse, and then it had a colt, April, and they were moving it to the family farm, to their farm. Yeah. And we were up there for that weekend.
Horse moving weekend.
yeah.
I think we missed that one, Jane.
I think I'm glad.
Well, I remember, I'm just thinking really early memories of Hank when Mommy and Daddy would take us to 202 and we'd go visit Aunt Mary and Pop, and then it was a big treat. Can we go over to the store? Is Uncle Hank here? We wanted to see
Oh,
him.
yeah.
So we always wanted to see if he was at
Yeah.
the store, and that was a big deal. Yeah.
And which store? I'm talking about 202.
202.
Yeah. Yeah, going across the
Yeah, that
driveway
was
to
a
get
big
free
thing.
ice
We
cream.
wanted, yes, we get free
Right,
ice cream.
get
He
free
was
ice cream.
good after that, but we always wanted to make sure, is he here? We would walk in and say, is our uncle here? So,
Yeah.
And of course, later he opened the milk store across the river.
yeah.
Yes, no.
That's the one I knew
Arlington.
about. I used to stop and say hello to Billy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all the boys participate in the business one way or another.
Yes.
So they did. Yes. So, and
It was part of the deal.
it was one of the early memories. Also, it goes to he was a favorite of Mabel and Harry Smith. They were a couple, had no children,
Yeah.
and Hank became like their special child, and they doted on him. And but they would take us, the three boys, and my mom down to River Edge, not River Edge,
Shark River.
Shark
Shark
River.
River.
Thank you.
Shark
River, New Jersey, for at least a week, and we would stay with him. But Hank was always at the center of all that was happening, because Harry had a special love for him, as did Mabel. She was a teacher at number 3.
They were very nice to him.
Of Hemi, yeah.
And
So-
he to them.
yeah, he was very good to them. And Hank was really, really great to Grandpa Waters. When he came back from the war, Hank was the one who took care of Grandpa Waters. Grandpa Waters died in 1956 May, and Hank came back in '54. So in that 2-year interim, Grandpa was failing in health, and Hank took care of him. And Hank did the same for my dad. Yeah, he did. He saw my dad every single day. Obviously, the business right there, 202. And so he would always stop and be one with my dad. And of course, he was there when Dad died. And of course, after that, the house was sold. The business took a different turn, and that's when he retired and moved out to Arizona. And I think at least, I'm not sure. The boys don't have to say how many years. I think it's 20 to 25 years he was out in Arizona. Yeah.
That one
And
quick.
Joe and I went out and visited twice. A little over 2 years ago, we visited him for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then you were out in California on a vacation, and you came in from California, you and Joe, and I flew out from Baltimore, and we spent again a couple of days visiting with the family out there. So now I don't know. Anyone else want to offer a thought, or because we said we do this for
Well, I don't think you can talk about Hank without mentioning Hemi either. I think
Hemi Joe.
Hemi's lost really.
Yeah, that was a great blow. Yeah, that was in 1978, April 1978.
Very
Sorry, it was November.
Very
Let's
tough
see.
time.
No, he was born in November, and he died. Yeah, I think
April.
it was April. It was April '78. Yeah, thank you. And of course, that was a terrible blow to Hank and to Alice and and the boys and to the family.
Yeah.
And we celebrated. Actually, St. Peter's Church was being renovated, so we couldn't celebrate the Mass in the church. I remember that we celebrated in the gymnasium of the St. Peter's School, and it was packed with all those young people who knew Hank, Hemi Joe, and yeah, that was a great loss. It was a similar to thing, 14, 15, 16 years later, whatever, I'm getting 1990, whatever that compilation is in terms of, with the loss of Michael.
Yeah.
So
Family's given up a lot.
that was a great blow to the family, both those deaths, So,
And you can't mention Hank without mentioning his great sense of humor.
all right.
And my lasting image of Hank will be in his green Irish sweater,
Oh yeah.
jeans, white socks,
and he would always greet you, me anyway, asking, "Did I ever? What was it? Did I ever tell you where the horse bit me?" Yeah, and I won't tell you what happened after that. It was his favorite greeting.
Just leave it right
And we'll leave it there.
Think of it with you too, huh?
Did I ever show you where the horse bit me? Paul, I gotta imagine he's mentioned that to you once or twice.
I got things I got falling for. 6 times.
Very good.
I remember when we were living in Belleville, and I would be there around lunchtime, and Hank would be sitting at the table, the kitchen table at 202, doing all his paperwork, and Pop sitting there, and then it would be like back and forth.
Yeah.
It was always like that, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, Grace, Joe and Hank were very close because I had moved on. When Hank came back, I was gone, and so Hank had that little room in the front of 202.
Oh, yeah, he was
Tiny room. Oh my gosh! And you had the bigger room you were sharing with Jerry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So any special?
No, he's a great brother. Actually, he really was. And you know, I can recall like always saying, "Gee, I don't think I'm a little short today." You know what I mean? Like I think I was like 12 or 14, and Hank always came back and had a couple of bucks too. You know.
Yeah.
You know, no, he's a really
always
good
very
brother.
generous.
Very good brother. I'll tell
He'd
you.
always spot you a couple of bucks when you needed them.
When I needed them, yeah,
Mhm.
I needed them all the time.
Didn't he leave his white bucks behind and you
Oh,
took them
yeah.
over, and then when he came home, he
Yeah.
had fit
Yeah.
the bucks?
Where are my white bucks? Well, I've been wearing them a long time. But yeah, he's very, very generous in that regard.
Yeah. No, he's always very generous.
Yeah,
Yeah. So.
he's a good brother. Very, very good brother. And,
Alice was a good wife too.
She was.
She
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
raised a nice family.
question, yeah.
Alice was
They
great.
had a nice
Yeah.
family together.
So.
Sure.
So we have a lot of wonderful memories and great gratitude to God for the blessing that He was in our lives, and He shared so much of who we are and made us, in many ways, who we are too, as we shared life together. So we thank God for that. And so we're going to continue this celebration. We're going to have a simple home mass, but we want to say thanks to all of you for sharing thoughts and reflections about Hank, and we want to say a farewell to our family out there in Arizona as you celebrate today Hank's life together. So thanks so very much. We're grateful. We'll be in touch.